Welcome back, listeners, to the Business podcast, where we talk about business, identity, and the parts of work no one puts on their LinkedIn profile. I'm your host, Sun, as always, and today's conversation, listeners, is about something many of us quietly wrestle with. What happens when your career looks successful but feels wrong? You might be doing everything you were told to do, getting promoted, earning well, building a reputation, and yet inside, something, something feels off. Not broken, not dramatic, just misaligned. Our guest today has lived this from the inside. He's reached the top of three very different careers, from executive leadership in government and transportation to elected public office to national media. And along the way, he noticed a pattern. People weren't failing at work, they were successful at work that didn't match who they actually were. He is now the author of Find Your X Factor, Follow Your Personal Treasure Map to Purpose, where he challenges the idea that career success automatically equals life fulfillment. So, listeners, meet my incredible guest, Paul Comfort. And Paul, welcome to BizPlan, and I'm really honored to have you here with us.
Hi, Santa. Thank you so much.
Okay, Paul, let's begin with your own journey, your own experiences. I mean, you have worked at the very high levels and in so many industries, multiple industries, and for me, I mean, if I look from my perspective, it's a huge success story. But you talk a lot about people who look successful and still feel empty. So, how did you personally realize that, like, success and misalignment, they are not the same? Sorry, alignment are not the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I live near Washington, D.C., and I spent most of my career working in government and transportation. I was CEO of the MTA in Baltimore, the transit system there, and the statewide transit agency. I've been an elected county commissioner, which is local government here in America. I've been county administrator, which is like the CEO of the county government. And I've also been, I have the world's number one public transportation podcast heard in 100 countries called Transit Unplugged and a TV show as well. And along that time, what I have noticed is that people flourish when they're operating at what I call their X factor, which is the intersection of their interests and their abilities. A lot of
Mm.
times, young people or even middle-aged people might be told, oh, follow your dreams, do what your dreams and your passion are. But I believe that's only one part of the equation. If you only follow your dreams and you don't have any abilities in those areas, you won't succeed. You'll become a failure, disillusioned, etc., most likely. But if you are able to find that intersection between your interests and your abilities, or what you're able to get good at, and focus in on that area, that's where you feel a great sense of success. So
Mhm.
that's the background and context for your question, which is how could you achieve greatness, let's say at your work or whatever, but maybe not feel fulfilled? Well, that would be because maybe you're doing something that you're good at, but if you're not really interested in it, then you're probably only doing it for a paycheck. You're working for the weekends, you're working to fund your hobbies, and
Yeah.
hobbies are a good indicator of what your interests are. So to answer your question directly, you could have focused in and learned how to be a great accountant, let's say, gone to school. But if it's not really where your passion is, if your passion is motorbike racing on the weekend or fly fishing, or whatever, and your interests are in that area and you're just doing this for a paycheck, you can be making good money, but still feel unfulfilled inside. And that's what I think is a lead up to what some people call a midlife crisis, right? You get in your 40s and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't what I wanted to do. And then you start making sometimes, not wise decisions. So that's what the book addresses largely is how to follow that treasure map in your own heart to
Mhm.
find a place where those two intersect.
Hmm. I really love that because it's not about taking sides or dismissing one of the two. I mean, because society, like, tells us if it is paying well, don't question it. Somewhere down the line, even I also kind of think similarly. But then what you're suggesting, Paul, is inner exhaustion. It is data, it is not weakness. And Misalignment, it doesn't have to always feel like crisis. It can be like slow emotional leak. Like, the job works on paper, but then your energy doesn't match it anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Yeah, and that's a good telltale signal, right? That
Mhm.
perhaps you're not operating in your X factor is if you wake up on Monday mornings and you're like, I gotta go to work today, and you're miserable. Then maybe it's time to do some self examination, right? And that's what the book Find Your X Factor talks about.
Hmm. Okay, we will definitely explore that in the conversation, listeners. But before that, Paul, you work with people who feel stuck in careers like they have outgrown. So, in in your experience, is there any specific factor, reason which actually keeps people in their misaligned careers, like the money, the stability, or identity, or fear? What exactly is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, a lot of people get stuck in a career because perhaps that's where they started, right? And as they say, the tree grew from where the apple fell. So, I remember back early in my career, um, I wanted to be involved in government. I knew that from an early age. I felt like government's where I could help make a difference in people's lives. And so I ran for office when I was 21, county commissioner, and I didn't win. I think that people thought I was too young for it. Um, and I tell the story in the book too. But afterwards, I met a guy on the campaign trail. His name was Irving, and he was the head of the county office on aging, helping the elderly. And he asked me, "Hey, Paul, we have a transportation position coming up, a brand new position. We run vans to take people to the doctors and to other appointments, shopping, et cetera, and to our senior centers. And we need somebody to manage that. I've only got a 1 year grant, but I think you'd be good for it if you want to apply for it." And I said, "You know what? I think I would love to do that. I really want to be in local government. I just ran for county commissioner. And so this will give me a chance to do as my full time job, helping people in local government." So now, Sana, here I am, 38 years later, still in that same industry. Now, it was not an industry I chose. It kind of chose me, right? I was looking for a job. I was offered several jobs, but this is the one that spoke to me the most. And so I was here. And then you get into it, and then you have what they call sunk costs. You're like, okay, I've been doing this for 15 or 20 years now. I'm considered an expert. I know what I'm doing. I'm making decent money. But maybe it's not exactly really what I wanted to do. And so what do you do at that point, right? They're not really golden handcuffs. I wasn't making millions, but I was making a living, and I had, to jump ship in the mid-40s and switch to a whole different career, you'd have to potentially start at the bottom again, and you're like, "Hey, life's only so long." And so what happens a lot of times is people then feel like, "Well, I can't get out of this," and then they get frustrated, and, it ends up performing affecting their work performance. So what I suggest in the book is that if you are in a career that can be aligned with what your interests are and your abilities, start working toward that. So here's what I did as an example. I've always loved communications, and this is what public communication. So it's radio, TV, etc. I had a part-time radio show all during this time when I first started my career, so it was an outlet for me. I had a on the weekends and at a show called Comfort's Corner on local AM station. And so when I got my first job, I still wanted to do communications, and so I started a newsletter. And the newsletter would go to all our employees, and then it would go to the whole department that we were in. And then I started giving interviews with local newspapers, et cetera, and staying involved in local media because that's what I really enjoyed. And then as I got into other jobs later in my career, I always leaned in toward communication. So when an opportunity came up when I was running a call center for a transportation system in Washington, D.C., there was an opportunity to train the new employees. And I said, I'll do it. I volunteer to do it because I wanted to communicate. I wanted to publicly communicate to a group, right? And then when I got into county management, I started a public television station for the county government so we could communicate to the public. When I got to the MTA in Baltimore that I mentioned earlier, the transit system, really large system, $1 billion budget. I was CEO. We had, over 3,000 employees and a couple thousand contractors. I started America's only FM radio station run by a transit system while I was there. So I always leaned into what I enjoyed about my job. So I was able to stay in transportation and yet still focus on public communications. We started. I had a television show when I was in at the MTA in Baltimore, and I invested money. It was called Commuter Connections. It's still on cable access in a million homes in the Baltimore, Washington region, et cetera, et cetera. And so, my point is, if you are at that point in your career where you're like, okay, I've been doing this 10, 20, 30 years, it's too late to really switch, I think, completely and quit my job and try something else. Just try to identify what it is your interests are and see if there are opportunities at your current job where you could explore doing that. You might even be able to shift your career within the agency or group you're in to do other things, which is what I'm doing now. For the last 8 years, I've done full time content creation and connection, which is what I love doing. And so I started work for this big company, this big software company, and they wanted somebody to do just that. And so I've been able to now do it full time. But for the previous 30 years, I did it kind of part time within the existing job structure I was in. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, Paul. And it does, at least to me, because excuse me, I can find so many, things with which I can connect with, like um I I mean, my core job, let's say it's business development or it's sales, but then I also love to mentor or guide. So, um, I and that's exactly where my next question is going to be. But before that, my immediate managers or seniors, they were able to identify, and along with me, I had also a very candid discussion with them about what exactly I would love to, in what other ways I can contribute. So that was something as a responsibility given to me, and that is something that I used to love to do, like mentoring or any new joinees coming into the company or joining the team and helping them. And it has been kind of recognized, by everyone. But then I want to ask you, Paul, is it kind of the responsibility, or the full responsibility lies on the person who is going to make their way with the prevailing systems and all the conditions in identifying their own aligned interests within that particular company or system, or there's also a certain kind of major change that you would like to see, because there are some cultures or companies or systems where it would be difficult to find our own way out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think to answer your question, I think that we have only one life to live,
Yeah.
right? Right now, while we're here,
Mm.
regardless of what your religious beliefs are about what happens after life. But
Yeah.
right now, this is the life you have, and so you have a responsibility to live it to your fullest. I think, and I think you won't find real satisfaction, or as Maslow called it, self actualization on Maslow's
Yeah.
hierarchy of
Yeah.
needs.
But
Um, you want to everyone is searching to find fulfillment in what they're doing. And so, yes, I believe each of us have a responsibility to first identify, to do what my book says, follow your personal treasure map to purpose. And the book outlines ways to do that, to follow, to actually identify what is my interest, what's the core of them, and there's ways you can take a list of all the things that energize you, that you get lost in, that you feel time just passes by quickly when you're doing them. And you feel fulfilled. You do it for free. It's your hobbies. You do it nights and weekends, etc. And you take those and you're able to kind of boil them down to their essence. And then you look at what people come to you for. Maybe you're mechanical, maybe you're an artist, maybe you have an ability to speak well in front of audiences that a lot of people are afraid to do that. And or you can identify what your skill sets are. And then you figure out where they intersect. So I think yes, you have an obligation to yourself to live your life as fulfilled as you can be. And a big part of our life is our job. We spend a third of our life and maybe half of our waking life for a lot of us on our job. And so you want that part of your life to be fulfilled. You don't want to just kind of live for the weekends, I would think. At least I don't. And so that's why I wrote the book to help people kind of take charge of their own course in life. And you don't have to make, in my opinion, drastic changes necessarily unless you're miserable at your job and you can't stand it and all that kind of stuff. Then I think you got to look at what else is there. But what we were talking about just prior to this was the ability to take stock of who you are,
Mhm.
where your interests lie, where your abilities lie, and then find that opportunity in your work to start moving toward that. That's what I think.
Yeah, that makes sense, Paul. It makes sense. And I think it also challenges the idea that people stay because they are lazy or unmotivated. I mean, it sounds more like they stay because they have invested too much of themselves to imagine a different version. And then, of course, there are social pressures which cannot be discounted here of like family expectations or professional reputation, sometimes ego. Uh, so it's not just changing or switching jobs, it's changing the story of who you are.
Yeah, I love that. Yep. Yeah, I think life sometimes has a way of getting away from us, right? uh,
Yeah.
family obligations, before you know it, you open your eyes and you're in your 40s. Then before you know it, you're in your 50s. Your kids are grown up, and so
Mhm.
you want to stop every now and then and make sure do a self check in. Am I happy with where I'm at? Is my life? Am I feeling fulfilled? What am I really chasing? What's the deeper motivations behind how I make decisions? There's a gentleman, Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote a book called Blink that I love, one of the best books I've read in a long time. And it talks about how we make these assessments in the blink of an eye of people and situations. And it's all based on this integrated background we have. And so, my suggestion to folks is to not let life go by in being unfulfilled. In order to become the very best version of you, you need to understand who you are. That's the start.
Mm. Mm.
And you don't get that by flipping through Instagram or TikTok, and spending hours and hours and hours you're not gonna do a lot of self-exploration there. That's a mind-numbing experience, and, instead, it will oftentimes you occupy your mind with things that aren't important, and before you know it, your life is by, and you didn't really do what you wanted to do, and my book is designed to help you think, for yourself and not let your mind be captured by mindless, numbing entertainment.
Absolutely. No doubt in there. No doubt in there. And Paul, about your book, I mean, it talks about finding your X factor. And it's inspiring, but then it can be vague to some people. So, what exactly do you mean by X factor? I mean, how is it different from just, supposedly like people would interpret, okay, finding your passion or finding something different within you?
Right. Yeah, so the subtitle of the book is Follow Your Personal Treasure Map to Purpose. And those of you who have ever seen a treasure map know that the treasure is usually marked with an X, a red X on the treasure map, right? You see TV shows or maybe you've actually been on a treasure map hunt yourself. The treasure is always marked with an X. So that's what it refers to. It refers to that spot, that intersection. It has multiple meanings. Not only is it the mark that's normally on a map for a treasure, but it also shows intersecting two lines, an X does. And in the book early on, I showed that, one part of the X, one line of the X represents your interests or what energizes you. And the other line on the X that intersects it represents your abilities. So there may be things that you are good at, but you've never really developed them. You have a natural inclination for them, but you've never really developed them. And so the idea here is figure out what it is you're good at, uh,
Mhm.
which is the one vector on the X, and then figure out what it is your interests are, boil them down to their core components, and then see where they intersect. So if my expertise is in public transportation systems, let's say, because I've worked in it for 30 years, and I've worked in the public and private sector, and I've done many jobs in the industry, and I know it very well. And my interest is in communications, networking, building relationships. So, where do they intersect? Transportation and communications intersect on my podcast, Transit Unplugged. or in my TV show, or in the books. I've written 6 books on public transportation, or in live events that I host around the country. I'm just booking one now, in Boston in a couple months with 4 of America's top public transportation CEOs. I'll have them on stage and a CEO roundtable. So I found the spot where my interest in communication intersects with my abilities on transportation and government, and that's where I can flourish and succeed. And so every day when I wake up, I feel like I'm being paid to do my hobbies. That's what it means to find that X factor.
Wow, I really love that, Robert, because it's redefining it because a lot of people, I mean, we are good at things that, we would secretly hate, like, like um, assuming competence equals calling. But this is like framing the X factor more like a pattern, as you mentioned, the roadmap is a treasure map. Like what naturally pulls you in, what feels internally alive. Like even if you are physically maybe feeling tired, but then when you do that thing, you feel like this internal spark, like this invigorating spark within you. And even when it's hard to do, but I think that really feels more practical than just saying, "Oh, follow your passion, do what you love," which can sound unrealistic to people with mortgages or responsibilities.
That's right. Yep. It takes some work. I've started a website, findyourxfactor.ai, where people can go and find out more. We're going to be putting up some tests where you can test yourself and analyze what is my interest, what are my abilities. That'll help you kind of go down that journey some. So yeah, it is. It's my goal with the book, and even with being here on your podcast, is to share with people that your life can be more than what it is now, and you don't have to really. Um, on the back of my book, it says, "This book is not about starting over. It's about uncovering what has been there all along." That's kind of what you mentioned there. So this book is more about uncovering what's already kind of hardwired into you. Your interests and abilities are already there, no matter how old you are, whether you're 18, just trying to figure out where do I want to go with the career, what do I want to do with my life, what's my purpose in life, whether you're halfway through and you're realizing, this isn't fulfilling, or whether you're at the end of your career and you've had a great career and you want to know what's now. I'm 60 years old. I've worked 35 years. I'm ready to kind of retire or from my full-time gig. What am I going to do next? The analyzing of yourself will help you figure that out. You don't need to, in my opinion, go to talk to someone else about it. You can figure that on your own. You can find your X factor and live in a state of fulfillment and really bliss every day with joy in your heart because you're doing what you were made to do. That is your X factor.
Mm. Yep. Yep. And any specific message or like the point, the starting point that you would like to suggest to, especially the younger generations, who would be at the starting phase in their careers, who would be like on this path of exploration, may not have the right resources as well. I mean,
Yeah.
something you would like to share.
Yes. So go to the website. It's free. Uh, findyourxfactor.ai. Sign up for the newsletter. I'll be sending out newsletters and information for free to anyone who signs up, which will help you find your X factor. For young people, and I've got children and grandchildren, I've spoken at college commencement exercises and high school. And I've said the same thing for the last 25 years when I've done these speeches. It's what I'm telling you right now. It's not enough to follow your dreams. You might want to be a great basketball player, or you might want to be a singer in a rock band. But if you don't have the abilities, yeah, and the competition is fierce, you're not gonna be a success there. For instance, I know we don't have much time left, but, when I was younger, I had a band when I was in college, a music band called Sons of Thunder, and we made a record, we toured, I played piano and sang, keyboard, and we had guitar, bass, drums, backup singers, lights, sound, all that, and I had a good friend named Don who wanted to he said, "Paul, I just wanna sing. I wanna I have this great desire to sing," but the problem was Don had a terrible voice. He couldn't carry a tune. I'd heard him sing. He sang for me, and he was awful. And I said to him, "Don, you know, maybe you should try guitar, or maybe you should try to, if you want to be in music, maybe you should try to be a lights guy or, sound guy or something else." But he just didn't have it. And so, had he gone down that road and, quit his job and moved to Nashville and tried to sing, I can tell you he probably would not have been successful because he didn't have the raw talent. he didn't have the ability to start working with, and it's a very competitive industry, the music, but
Mm.
just like for our band. And eventually, when I graduated from college, I realized we're okay, but we're not good enough to go professional. So I talked to the band and I said, look, we're all getting ready to start our real lives. We've spent a lot of our time and energy, practicing and traveling to play gigs, but we know we're not that good. We're average and we're not going to make it. So let's just say it was a good run. We had a good time and call it off. And so we did. We broke up the band. It was like the first real adult decision I made, in my life where I had to stop something that I loved doing, but I knew we could not make it as a career. Now, I've kept playing music. I play at church. I play for senior centers. I, played for weddings and all that kind of stuff. So I've kept music in my life, but as a hobby, because I know I'm not good enough to compete full time as a full time musician. So that's what the book for young people also tells you is that you need to analyze what it is you're willing to put in the time. Now, had I been willing to take, lessons for 10 years and become super good? Yeah, I had taken some lessons, but at that point, I did not have the time nor the capacity to become that much better at that skill of playing piano and singing. So I knew I couldn't do it full time, so I set it aside and focused on my career. And so you have to make some wise decisions. You may like fishing, you may like hunting, you may like race car driving, you may like basketball, all these things, but you got to analyze what am I good enough at or can get good enough at that I can go pro. And you may have to start doing it on the side as a hobby and then work it in.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a very practical, sensible, responsible take on this because I mean, I've seen an entire generation driven by just following our passions, picking up a guitar, and then realizing that this is not something that would put food on their table, and not something that will make them stand out. So yeah, it's a very
Yeah.
big. Oh,
Yeah.
so
So I would just encourage people if you're interested in this, if this conversation captured your interest and you're interested in finding out more, simple thing to do is just go to, findyourxfactor.ai and, sign up for the newsletter and we'll send you a test that you eventually in the next couple months, we're going to have one developed. The book itself is published on August 11th. It's being published by Morgan James. You can get it. You can pre-order right now on Barnes and Noble or Amazon or anywhere else you get your books. And I look forward to hearing from you. Send me a note on findyourxfactor.ai, and I'm happy to communicate with you as well.
absolutely, listeners, there you go. You heard it from Paul. And what I'll do is, as I always do for all of you, is have all these details mentioned in the show notes so that you can easily reach out to Paul. He can easily also get hold of his book, Finding Your X Factor. And I mean, Paul, thank you so much because this has been such a grounded conversation about something, people usually only think about late at night, like when the world is quiet and the questions get loud.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So, listeners, what I'm taking away is this. Career alignment isn't about quitting your job tomorrow or today. It is about asking better questions today. Not how do I look successful, but does my work match who I am becoming? And if someone listening feels stuck but afraid to move, I think let's start with these questions because you don't have to burn your life down to change direction. And thank you everyone for tuning into this blend. Until next time, this is your host Sana, and I'll catch you in the next episode of this blend. Thank you.